Right. Hello, can you all hear me? Great. Okay, wonderful. So welcome everyone. I'm Henry Bewley, Membership and FinTech Executive here at the IA and Engine. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for managing to be here in spite of difficult transport conditions. This is an absolutely amazing turnout, so really wonderful to see so many of you in the room. Our last Tech Talk was all the way back in September, where we discussed the benefits and challenges of using technology to achieve ESG goals. That's, of course, a conversation that's still prevalent in our industry, and 5 of our sustainability-focused Engine members delivered excellent power pitches last week at the IA's Sustainability and Responsible Investment Conference, highlighting ongoing challenges and how they are working to address them. This week, however, sorry, I'm hearing a really weird noise, I don't know what that is. This week, however, I'm delighted that we're back at the IA offices with an in-person audience to explore the topic of generative AI. Generative AI harnesses algorithms and models that have learned patterns and structures from large sets of data. This knowledge then enables the generation of new content that is drawn from the input data. So what is that? Oh, I see. Okay. So that's a very high-level overview of generative AI. By the time we get to our panel that we're coming up to shortly, I'm sure the actual technologists will give a far better outline of what it is. Generative AI has the potential to disrupt nearly every industry, promising both competitive advantage and creative destruction. As it continues to evolve, it's vital for business leaders to understand its impact and strategize for the future. Generated content from generative AI can be anything from chatbot responses, product design, synthetic data sets, deepfake images, or video, and even opening remarks for tech talks. There's no better time to discuss this than now. Alongside AI, a combination of recent innovations such as tokenization and distributed ledger technology have propelled financial services into a new era, with investment management in particular benefiting. Schroders have recently incorporated an AI platform to revolutionize their customer interaction and compliance processes, while BlackRock have created an AI lab to conduct research at the intersection of AI and finance, synthesizing ideas to drive innovation in both fields. Generative AI itself has shown the potential to create new investment strategies, optimize portfolios, and generate alpha in ways that were previously unimaginable. Earlier this month, we heard news that a fictional equity fund that used ChatGPT to select its stocks outperformed the UK's 10 most popular funds, which raises questions about the democratization of investment strategy and the role that humans will play in financial services going forward, if any. Some brief housekeeping notes just before we get started. So we're not expecting a fire alarm. So if you do hear one, please make an orderly exit out here, straight to the right, to the fire escape in the kitchen, and you'll be escorted to safety. Please ensure all phones are on silent mode. However, keep them on you. This event is being recorded and will be available on the IA website post-event along with the slides. Please use your mobiles to scan this QR code on the right. This will allow you to participate in the 2 upcoming polls we have and submit any questions. So if you do have any questions at any point, submit them through here and we'll get to them if we have time. And afterwards, a feedback form will be sent to you after the event. So please do complete it, as your opinions help us put together future events. So with that out of the way, we are very keen to get the room's initial thoughts on this topic. So if I could please encourage you to get involved with the poll question that will appear on the screen, excellent, via that QR code. So first question we have, are you currently using generative AI? And if yes, which one? Or which ones? I think you can select multiple choices. So we should, hopefully, with the magic of technology, see those fly in as you want. 23, 24, lovely. Okay. Coming in. Wonderful, a strong response, great. Okay, let's see how we did. Nice, interesting. I didn't expect none to be second. That's good to see. I didn't expect Bing to be third, to be completely honest. But yeah, ChatGPT out in front, fantastic. Okay, Good to know. Good starting point. Excellent. Okay, so thank you all for your input there, and it's really good to see industry engagement and actually have kind of tangible answers to this firsthand. We're really excited today to be welcoming an array of phenomenal minds to discuss exciting new ideas and map out some potential paths ahead. So I will now pass you over to Francesca Bluck, who is policy lead on the capital markets team here at the IA, who's moderating a panel on generative AI and use cases in asset and wealth management.
Thank you, Henry. I'm glad you forgot to join me. Please come take your seat. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first IA Engine Tech Talk of the year. And despite rapid advancements in AI, it seems that nothing could prevent today's rail strike. And if anyone has been following the agenda closely, you will have worked out that I am not Kate Land from Inalytics. Unfortunately, she was caught out by the train strike. I am indeed Francesca Bluck, as Henry said, and I'm a policy lead in the capital markets division here at the IA. And I am delighted to be joined by three esteemed panelists beside me who are going to help us over the next 25 minutes delve into the world of generative AI and the use cases for asset and wealth management. Well, we're going to dig in as deep as we can, but for as long as 25 minutes allows. And perhaps this is a timely panel to be having, given back in April, the UK's government pledged something like 100 million to help build out the UK's use of generative AI. So without further ado, because you're not here to see me, you're here to see the panelists beside me, I will hand over to my panelists to introduce themselves, starting from near to far.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm Mathieu Kep from Amundi Technology. I'm leading innovation. Previously, I was Chief Data Science Officer, and previously from business side as an ETF producer and fixed income portfolio manager assistant. So I'm happy to be with you today to talk about ChatGPT and so many generative AI we are working on in Amundi and share with you some insight.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Dawe. I'm the CEO of Orbit Financial Technology. We have actually been running for about 8 years, and we have been doing unstructured data since day one and up to now. And yeah, we start to integrate ChatGPT and on the production level. So glad to share what we are doing at the moment. Thank you.
I'm Chalam. I'm founder and CEO of Placemate.io, a provider of location, asset data, and analytics for the real estate community and beyond. I'm a mathematician by training, and I'm actually very happy to have my old PhD supervisor here, mathematician.
Thanks, guys. And we will have some time for audience questions at the end. But I think it's really interesting to see from Henry's first poll question that a lot of people are using ChatGPT, but still some aren't using any kind of generative AI within their business. And perhaps that's where we start. And perhaps that's my first question to the panel. To briefly explain the distinction between generative AI and just AI, I guess, and what you consider to be the unique selling points for generative AI within our industry. So Mathieu, maybe I can start with you.
So briefly, I imagine, how can I say AI and generative AI? It's like the difference with a parrot and a poet, something like this. In fact, a parrot trying to hear some word and repeat it. That's only the thing it's doing. It's AI, in fact. And the poet is trying to invent, to imagine sometimes meaningful things. For the poet, definitely it's meaningful. For generative AI, it's often meaningful, but not always. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to put it. I might use that. Very poetic. Da.
Okay, I will talk about our use cases. So mostly about analyzing the documents. So what's the difference? I think in the past, AI means for every task, you probably need to train and develop a model for that task. So therefore, you probably will eventually maintain a long list of models, each doing everything specifically, and you need to assemble them together for your overall application. But the generative AI or ChatGPT, it's just so beautiful. It's one large language model can do everything. And because of its decoder-only architecture. I think for every new task, it's literally about asking a new question. So that makes our job much, much easier. I think that's what I see.
I'll give a more technical response. AI itself is the science and engineering of intelligent machines, the intelligence that such machines exhibit, and the simulation of human intelligence by a machine. And machine learning is a subfield of AI and embodies a particular set of approaches to solve specific tasks. In particular, machine learning is the science and engineering of training a machine to accomplish a particular task based on experience and data without needing to be explicitly programmed. AI has largely been focused on analyzing data to identify patterns, extract features, or forecast trends. For example, classification, spam filters, image, voice, and face recognition, NLP, and so on. But generative AI, as the name suggests, learns patterns in the training data to generate novel data. For example, text, an image, a video, audio clip, and so on, with similar characteristics or prescribed characteristics. And generative models have been around for quite a while, but most of the recent developments in these most recent, I guess, algorithms have been can be traced to the 2017 paper called Attention is All You Need by Google researchers that introduced a new type of architecture called the transformer model. GPT, for example, stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And the transformer model has a lot of engineering advantages. The entire input can be processed all at once instead of sequentially, as in some older models. You have positional encoding that provides context for particular inputs, and you have an attention mechanism that more or less mimics the cognitive attention that we see.
That was really very helpful. And before we move on to our next question, perhaps it's time for a question to the audience. So for those joining virtually, if you just tap the QR code, and for those in the room, I think you all know what to do by now. Just get those phones up and scan the code. So I feel a bit like Chris Tarrant now. Where do you see the greatest use case for generative AI in investment management? Is it A, portfolio optimization, 2, trading, 3, forecasting, 4, risk management, 5, compliance, or 6, other? And while we wait for those results to roll in, maybe now's a good time to consider how could or will generative AI change the landscape for our industry? Machu, there is a question here about generative AI and how we scale that up and how we kind of align that with legacy AI. And what has your experience been at Amundi so far?
I will make maybe just a step backward. I often ask to people who talk with me about the generative AI, who is the boss of asset management industry? You can have one guess or say it, or we have a few people here. I often answer that the boss is the cost-income ratio every time. And so we can work on focus innovation on the cost, meaning automatizing some processes. And often you need huge IT platform to perform it. And you can work also on the income part with 2 main drivers, the alpha into your investment and the net inflows. Okay. And if we want to talk about generative AI, about the cost, we have built a platform in Amundi named Alto. It's the same database for everybody, every business line. So every portfolio manager, risk officer, compliance officer work with the same data. It's a way to align everybody on the same language. We didn't see, to be honest, a huge improvement thanks to generative AI. We have put a lot of AI, machine learning, robotization, and so on. It works well, but generative on the cost side, not sure there is a huge effort to do to improve the TCO of the platform. From the alpha, I get the introduction, I don't know where is Henri, but here, I get the intro about alpha into the fund thanks to GPT. We have some initiatives, but we didn't focus really on the alpha side, but rather than on the risk side, meaning how we can catch quickly a 360-degree view on non-linear risk, meaning fetching quickly all private knowledge from Amundi and the market and having an overview of the different risks, asking a question on a specific topic and give an answer of the collective knowledge, okay, the common knowledge share in different language with different prisms and so on. So there is matter on that. But we have initiative not at prod level, not at scale at scale. But about the last driver, the net inflows, definitely it will be massive. And we are already in production because we have a platform. It's easy for us to be at scale quickly because it's easy to deploy features accessible to a lot of different users in Amundi or for clients. But talking about compliance, controlling all marketing stuff, be sure we are aligned with all regulators. Okay, helping as writing assistant, but based on our private knowledge for RFP, for instance. Helping marketing to publish ad hoc presentation, really focus on the client needs, etc. For investment specialists. All this kind of stuff will be massive, but not thanks the knowledge embedded by the models of LLMs, whatever it's ChatGPT, Llama, whatever, but based on your private knowledge. The golden source is you. You just need to find an easy way to keep the confidentiality of your knowledge, but use this kind of model to just have an access to your knowledge quickly for all your analysts and specialists. This is what we have tackled thanks to Data Studio. It's not an easy way. We have different, but maybe we'll discuss more about, but you have confidentiality, user adoption, you have, we have a Microsoft guy, you have the infrastructure and cost behind, for sure, it's a major issue. So maybe we can deep dive into this kind of subject, but just keep as a main idea, we can do massive things on the netted flows, but there is challenge to face, and most of them had to be from an MVP, from a proof of concept, from an minimum viable product, to be at scale. This is where you can improve your business. In fact, this is where we are.
And talking of data, how do we address unstructured data that comes from a lot of generative AI? How do we control for that and make it more strategic to use?
Yeah, sure. I think definitely ChatGPT makes the unstructured data in a very strategic position, and we never seen that before. And I am sure probably many of you see the exciting examples like how ChatGPT can read a document, can analyze an Excel, can even write up a PowerPoint slide, can do many things like that. So probably the next question for professionals in the buy side is how we can apply that on the professional data, right? On the annual report I'm analyzing, on the broker research I'm reading, on the emails, on my internal data. So is it possible? Can I use it really as a production tool to make my job easier and more efficient? So I think that's what we have been trying to do, and it works. I think that the reason, as I mentioned earlier, in the past, I think because of the rich information embedded in the document, it's very hard to have one solution that can extract all the different dimensions of information out of the document, out of the data. So we went through some very difficult and long implementations with clients in the past. But now I think that changes. So the way running the embeddings to pre-process the document, to store that in the vector database, mixing with the traditional search engine like Elastic, and also calling ChatGPT. The long chain is there. There are more and more open source frameworks available. You have enough tools to build a massive and enterprise level solution for your internal organization. Either this is about analyzing public data, or this is about analyzing your own data. You can control it. So you can always control, asking the question and only find the answer from where I defined. Don't go anywhere else. And also you can ask in the most specific way. You can find a reference from your underlying document. So you can always prove that is fact checked. So I think all that is what we see is a game changer for the industry. Yeah.
Thanks, Star. Shlump, excuse me. I know you have some experience of using generative AI with investment modeling, so maybe you could expand on that a little more for the audience.
Yes, so I'll touch on 4 really interesting opportunities. One is, as you touched on already, the automation of certain tasks. So for example, real estate is really a document-heavy industry. Think about leases, management agreements, JV agreements, lease docs, loan documents, and so on. You can use AI to summarize these documents, to extract features, for example, lease terms, to flag risks, and also to generate these documents, for example, a pitch deck or a contract, and so on. But the more interesting opportunity is to use it for investment modeling. Think about traditional real estate asset valuation. One really crude method is to essentially estimate the cap rate based on, say, comps, and then use net operating income to back out the valuation. It's a very crude method. More sophisticated approach, and one that's recommended by the RICS, is to incorporate discounted cash flow modeling. So you have a more sophisticated approach that could use, say, a neural network combined with a hedonic model combined with discounted cash flow to produce a valuation. And AI could automate that whole modeling process, taking into account all the rents, the OPEX, the CAPEX, the acquisition price, the potential disposition price, the local market conditions, and so on, and then say whether or not to proceed with further DD. It could also be used to, say, automate a carried interest model. You could return all the key metrics, say IRR or the profit to each partner and so on, automatically. But there are other opportunities to use AI to come up with new investment strategies, maybe ones that you'd never considered before. So for example, it might recommend a strategy based on the current and predicted market conditions. And this could cover everything from, say, capital allocation by country, by sector, by asset class, by profile, so maybe core, core plus, or value add or opportunistic. It could produce recommendations on the ideal capital stack, the amount of leverage to use, and it might recommend a strategy that maybe no one else had considered before. For example, maybe something like taking this particular asset and converting it from retail to last mile logistics. Maybe it's something completely bonkers and no one had ever thought of. And the final point is more around repricing. Real estate is unlike other industries, especially equities, that you don't have much clarity in pricing, and it's a very slow market. But with high frequency trading and algo trading and so on, you might see quicker repricing in real estate, which means that we might be able to see more real-time pricing, for example, real-time rental pricing and so on. These are the more exciting opportunities.
That's really interesting, and it seems there's a lot of ways we can use AI both internally and externally within our organizations. But maybe I can take a moment for us to look at the screen and look at the responses to the poll questions. And I guess I'm throwing a little bit of a curveball at you guys here on the panel, but from a first read, does that surprise you, or are those results in line with your thinking on how people would be using AI within investment management?
From my point of view, not surprised,
no?
But I think we need to discuss one key point for portfolio optimization. Because when you want to use AI to optimize your portfolio, your investment, get your investment ID, even if it's for the strategic asset allocation and not only for the stock picking, you have to explain it at the end of the day to your client and explain something and your decision with a black box. Look at you. We didn't do it, to be honest. We try to merge and embed different way, but the core system to detect investment opportunities is always made with supervised machine learning at max or simple heuristic, symbolic AI, but definitely not deep learning. Non-explicable.
Any other comments from the panelists?
Yeah. I'm not surprised at all.
No?
Because if you see the top rated ones, they're the ones probably traditionally in a more manual process and more unstructured data involved, more label intensive. So that's where the automation comes in, and I think the best applications.
Just anything from you?
Yeah, not surprised. I mean,
No.
They're essentially associated with generating capital, so it's where you would expect the interest to be.
So, I mean, it all sounds a bit too good to be true. We should all just start using generative AI and all our problems are solved. But the cynic in me feels that perhaps there are challenges that we do need to consider and address with the use of AI. I mean, I'm sure many of you read the news article yesterday that made the headlines that the use of AI is going to lead to extinction. And that's all a little too iRobot for me. And perhaps that's a bit of a philosophical question that we don't need to discuss on this panel. But maybe closer to home, there are issues that we do want to explore. For example, here at the IA, just the other week, my colleagues in the market insights team, they got a few queries from a couple of members asking for a survey that we did back in 2019 that doesn't exist. This is a phantom survey, but ChatGPT had cited some stats and used us as the source for that. And this issue of kind of data hallucination is quite a common theme that we're experiencing right now. And beyond that, I guess, what other challenges exist with the use of AI and how do we address them? I guess I'm thinking around increased volatility, issues relating to trading, and of course, the issue of artificial junk. We all know, we've been in the industry a long time, data you put in, data that comes out, good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. So maybe I can open up and maybe you can start us off with that one.
Sure. Hallucination is probably one of the biggest problems. I mean, these AI systems are very prone to hallucinate and produce factual errors. And that's because they don't have any sort of conceptual understanding of the world. For example, if you ask one of these systems, which would be better, cold water, mug that has the bottom cut off, or light bulb with the bottom cut off, it might say bug. That's because it doesn't understand these sorts of objects. There's another problem. It's called the alignment problem. And the problem is that AI might just have misaligned objectives. And so, for example, if you apply an AI to investment management, it might come up with a completely different strategy that no one had ever thought of, but it might have a poorly specified or maybe a faulty reward function. A really good example is something has to do with a game, a boat racing game called Coast Runners. An AI was trained to play this game, and the AI learned that the best way to rack up points was not to finish the race first, as human would do, but to sail around in a circle and just repeatedly knock over targets, despite crashing into other boats, catching on fire, and then going the wrong way. That could happen if we apply AI without solving this particular problem. You mentioned increased volatility and systemic risk. I mean, this has happened many times in the past. You had program trading, for example, that led to Black Monday. You had high-frequency trading that led to the flash crash. You're going to see these types of issues come up more often because these sorts of systems can react so quickly and maybe distort market signals to such high degrees that you might see really sudden price swings. So increased volatility and systemic risk in the market. A small change in market conditions might lead to a huge volume of trades, for example, and that could have unforeseen consequences. Another issue is that a lot of these systems they tend to converge toward very similar trading decisions. You might have people using the same AI system, they all get sort of the recommendations, which means that they all end up making the same sorts of decisions. This can lead to market failure because you might have a whole bunch of traders on one side of the market and then the market collapses. And then you mentioned data pollution. This is a big issue. You have all these generative systems that are producing a lot of data, but a lot of these generated data points are just nonsense. They're just junk. These are then being fed back into these systems. Think about all of the generated content now that is then being used as training data. We're going to see a greater disconnect between what is actually good data or data that reflect the real world and then generated data that have no real connection to the real world. We have to solve that particular issue as well. Also, these systems are reinforcing biases and might be using incorrect information to generate the recommendations, which means that we have to be very careful and validate the recommendations that come out. There's not enough information out there yet on market crashes, which means that they could become more relevant or more probable because the systems haven't really learned to treat them yet. And you mentioned black box and lack of explainability. That's a huge issue. There are no really good models yet that can explain why these systems work.
Thanks. Da, anything from you?
Yes, I can comment on the implementation side of the challenges. So OpenAI the ChatGPT is just so new. For example, Longchain is probably the most well-used framework to glue everything together, the data, the API. But I remember when we started back in March, the version was 0.03. Now it's probably 0.17 something. So it is far away from matured or stabilized yet. So keep changing, and there are technical surprises every day. And also, while ChatGPT being that smart and intelligent layer, it really add a lot of complexities on the data, on the architecture level. So how to link adding that additional components to your existing infrastructure, that's a big challenge. Yeah, and also I think practically when we really talk about going into the production, processing huge volume of data, then we are talking about the limits of the APIs and all that technical limit, how we can resolve that to support the live usage. So I think those are a few like practical engineering level challenges.
Mathieu?
What can I add? So we discussed about confidentiality. We have discussed about the cost at scale for the infrastructure and usage. We have talked about black box, but I just want to add something. This kind of model cannot learn on the fly, the news. Okay, so for our business, make no sense to use it to get the knowledge. The knowledge is the day-to-day knowledge. Okay, so you will definitely use this kind of LLM connecting or coupling with another source of knowledge. Okay, not the one given by the model. And this is a key to avoid the black box effect, in fact, because what we have developed, for instance, you have a UI in Data Studio, you chat with your chatbot, it will answer, but based on some point of knowledge given by our vector store. Okay, and when you get back the answer, you can click. In one click, it will give you again all the chunks, all the paragraph or document where the right information is given. So even if chatbot is a black box, you can retrieve the source of knowledge, and the knowledge is yours. So you can just have an eye on it. And again, we didn't expect, from Amundi point of view, we didn't expect to remove analyst and portfolio manager. We just expect to enhance them and empower them. So at the end of the day, the one who pushes the button is a human. So again, if you can retrieve the knowledge, control with his eye, no worries about the black box. So there is an issue, but we can tackle it. Next, we didn't talk about it, but maybe that Amundi is 5,000 people. Amundi Technology is 1,000. So sometimes we feel more like a tech company rather than an asset manager. And so we are using also this kind of technology to code, to help our developer to improve. And I just want to give you just an advice. We have tested a lot, Star Coding, ChatGPT, Copilot, many LLM. So my best developer are going so fast and so well, and my worst developer are going so fast and so well on what they are able to do, making more bugs. Okay, so be careful. It's huge to discover new framework, analyze this new code and so on, but you will not replace your IT saying that. Okay, that's just the last risk I saw.
So no one's out of a job just yet. Okay, so that leads us on to our last question before perhaps we open the floor to questions. And I know, Mathieu, you touched on this earlier, but what ways can generative AI be used to generate alpha in our industry? And what impact could this have on the industry as a whole?
I don't know if I have the right answer. I have to keep it secret.
Okay.
But no, anyway, from a long-term investment view, I think the 360-degree common knowledge given by ChatGPT you can request, so it's perfect. It will make a lot of sense. Coupling with, we have built, for instance, an AI about behavior analysis. You're detecting the cognitive biases of your portfolio manager to diversify the risk inside the team. We can, in fact, we need some tools during the nudge system to discuss, in fact, with the portfolio manager, because the portfolio manager didn't want to say to us directly his target. So we can use it to facilitate because it's a new way to have a human-machine interface, something like this. So maybe we can improve things that, but again, it's about coupling different legacy system, symbolic AI with a new human interface machine, really powerful and friendly. Okay. And short term, we also play with autonomous agent like AutoGPT, but we didn't talk today about it. But you can imagine to have a lot of ChatGPT talking together and defining the list of tasks. And we are trying this kind of stuff. And I go back to my friend. It's not stable yet at all. And every day we have new releases. So don't put in finger into it right now. But it will, I think, be massive from the alpha side.
I see you smiling there. Is there something you'd like to add to that? Please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I think to summarize, I think it will impact the industry in an indirect way. So I don't think it's practical to ask ChatGPT, what is the best stock I should pick, because that you start to have a big black box and eventually nobody will trust, it won't work and so on. So, but I think instead you can look at all the steps within your investment process and your operational process. There are so many steps you can optimize with ChatGPT to improve the efficiency, to look at more data, to do more research, to get more thorough opinion, and then eventually make your better decision. I think that's my view.
Thanks, Dar. Stump, anything from you?
Yes, probably what's most interesting is that AI might uncover or recommend completely novel, unexpected ways to generate alpha that no one has ever considered before. For example, it might come up with a completely crazy investment strategy that yields a massive competitive advantage, but that's mainly because it's just beyond the expectations of human investors. So really, you're not going to have, say, humans getting replaced by AI, but probably humans getting replaced by humans who do use AI. Because they're able to generate all of these other ideas that no one else has really thought of.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I will open the floor to questions in case anyone has any questions they'd like to put to the audience, to the panelists. Please just put your hands up. I know it's old school, but that's the way we roll. We have a question at the front here, Jack.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Lefebvre from Capital Group. You've talked a lot about some of the risks concerning these technologies. So, for example, the error rate is well known. The intellectual property of generated content is still unclear. So could you maybe share a little bit about any guardrails or guidelines you've imposed in your companies or advised in a lighter sense about how not to use this AI today in light of that? For example, you talked about allowing developers to use it. Are you allowing that code to go into production?
No. For the reason I mentioned about the worst developer. The way we have proceeded is the following. We have opened for a small community, 200 people, to play with, but freely. They can do whatever they want. And then we have analyzed all the log of their usage to understand where there is value. Okay. At the end of the 3 months of test, we have putting a survey and we have asking to them if the technology is useful for core tasks or satellite tasks, and what the features are missing really to put value. And quickly, 90% of the answer was, I need my private knowledge. If not, I don't care. It's nice, it's enthusiastic technology, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, to really achieve my day, I need my private knowledge. And so it's answer to you. One, we deploy case by case with the different business to start with compliance and traductions and blah, blah, blah. So we can control it. Second, we use our private knowledge. So there is no issue about the IP, even if the wording is made by ChatGPT, is based on private knowledge of us. So we can prove that we can do the same as human. So we didn't have this issue as of today. I don't know what about tomorrow. I think we will wait from the regulator as the open discussion we all have today with Europe and US. We'll see the alignment between both.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Gentleman here.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Wojtek Buczynski, EY, and University of Cambridge. So it's sort of question/comment. So first of all, it strikes me that even though this talk is titled Generative AI, the use cases that we discussed, none of them is new and original. Those are new and better versions of use cases that we have known, text analysis, natural text generation, etc. So I'm just curious, it seems like that unique Gen AI use case is yet to be discovered, and I find this quite intriguing. But also, particularly, Trump, to your point about new and exciting investment strategies. So yes, but one thing that I think that this presentation sort of overlooked a little bit is the regulatory angle. You've got the EU AI Act coming up imminently. You've got the UK government AI white paper. You've got pockets of regulation. I mean, you have MiFID too. Your proverbial crazy investment strategy would fail MiFID II's Article 24 and 25 suitability test unless you were doing it, in a sort of non-regulated structure. So I think that this is actually a really interesting angle to explore, because the more interesting it gets, the more difficult it might get from the regulatory perspective. And there was an experiment conducted not long ago by Man AHL, the quant hedge fund, who actually asked ChatGPT for stock recommendations across different strategies. And the outcomes were unimpressive to average, because they really did proper testing of those strategies. So I just wonder to what extent that single most exciting use case that so many of us picked as number one is realistic, because we've been there before with Twitter sentiment analysis with Derwent Capital some 12 years ago. We've been there with a couple of AI-powered funds which folded quite quickly. So I'm just wondering, is it really different this time?
Big question. Does anyone want to take that?
I can give a try. Yeah, I think it's different. So going back to the name, generative AI, I think in the past, we talk about natural language processing, natural language understanding, natural language generation. So they're quite different angles. But I think now you call it generative AI or large language model. Is actually one model can do all of that. So yeah, from our use cases of extracting the data from documents. So in the past, yes, that's an extraction task. But now with ChatGPT, it's like you ask a question, what is the icing in this document? It returns the answer. It's like a Q&A, but it actually can perform the extraction task. So it can do everything with this Q&A fashion. So that's why I think probably don't focus on whether it's generative or not, but the actual use case, how we can better use this model. And another factor, I think, why fundamentally it is different is, again, in the past, every time we want to do something new, we need to develop a new model in the past. But now it's the same price, you just ask a different question. Everything becomes so scalable. So that's my.
And unfortunately, I think we're out of time now, but I know the reg part of your question we will look to answer later on in today's session, because we're going to be talking to that. All I have left to do now is thank my panelists. Thank you so much for a very interesting panel. And hopefully you'll stick around for the drinks after for any more questions. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
So I'd like to echo that. Thank you very much to the panel for their insights. That was excellent. Up next is Mark Lewis, who is a senior consultant from McFarland's, who's going to speak about the ethical and legal considerations of generative AI in asset and wealth management. I'll hand over to you, Mark.
I hope you can all see that. There's just one slide, which is a bit racy for a lawyer. especially for that kind of slide. That's supposed to be my mind, what's left of it. I'm apologizing in advance. I have a bad cold, so if I start coughing uncontrollably, that's it. AI, of course, including generative AI, can and should unlock huge potential, as you've started hearing about in the asset and wealth management industries. But AI, and especially generative AI, must be approached thoughtfully and in the full knowledge of how to deploy it well, or as well as you can, while understanding, avoiding, and managing risk. Easy to say, not so easy to do. In the time we have, I want to cover the ethical and legal risk and considerations at a high level, but capturing the main themes and issues for you. And I would suggest that everything you need to think about for now is on that strange slide. I'll be moving from cloud left in an easterly direction, and then starting again on the left in the next line. So basically running through in a kind of serpent. And from now on, unless there's a particular reason to call out generative AI, I'm going to be including generative AI in the expression artificial intelligence, machine learning systems and processes. Well, it won't surprise you to know that as a lawyer, my advice is that ethics will never be enough. As an approach, particularly at this stage in the life of AI, ethics is certainly helpful, as you'll hear in a moment. But any ethical approach currently must also take account of actual and potential legal and regulatory risk and considerations. You'll hear more about those too. AI and generative AI in particular now and will have even greater later real-world consequences that can impact both positively and negatively, potentially, your firm, clients and suppliers, balance sheet, P&L, trust in your firm. And that's a big one in the context of trustworthy AI, which we hear a lot about, and especially where customers' assets and wealth are involved. And of course, AI can affect your firm's reputation. In the UK and elsewhere for now, there is both legal and regulatory uncertainty and unpredictability about the use of AI and machine learning and generative AI. Except for trading algorithms, and you had a question about those, I'm pleased to hear, there is as yet no specific law or regulation in the UK that applies to anyone in the asset or wealth management sectors, be they regulated firm, provider, supplier, retail, customer, anyone using artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'll return to that in a little more detail. You've started hearing about the European Union AI Act. It's very difficult to avoid it. The content of the AI Act is beyond the scope of this session, but for those firms operating in the UK and the EU, and for any artificial intelligence or generative AI providers selling into the EU marketplace or user of generative AI in the EU, the AI Act will apply to you. The Act should be finally agreed by the end of 2023 and enter into force in 2024. It should then actually start applying in practice in a staged way within a range of 12, 24, and 36 months from then. Those of you following the Act's progress will know that it will apply now both to generative or general purpose and general purpose AI, and of course the provision of financial services. You'll be hearing more later in the session about the UK approach to regulating AI, quite recently announced by the UK government after a long delay, but according to current press reports, maybe about to be completely rethought, with the UK perhaps considering an approach to regulating AI that may in some respects be closer to the European Union's. But as far as we know today, the government's current policy means the prospect of pro-innovation, no legislation for now, sector regulation. Which brings us to the three most relevant, Go back up. Yeah. The three most relevant regulators for our purposes. So as you'll know, the FCA, PRA, and the Bank of England have been taking a close interest in AI and machine learning. And you may remember that in October 2023, those three regulators jointly published a discussion paper on AI and machine learning, DP522, not surprisingly entitled Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning, no surprises there, which asked four main questions. Should there be a definition of AI for regulatory purposes? What are the risks and benefits arising from AI in financial services, focusing on consumer protection, competition, safety and soundness, interestingly, insurance policyholder protection, and financial market and stability, for financial stability and sort of market integrity, sorry. What are the current and future legal requirements and the need for guidance to mitigate AI risks? And they call out the new Consumer Duty, UK GDPR, the Equality Act, I'll say more about that, and the Senior Managers and Certification Regime, SMCR. And finally, overall, the regulators asked if the current regulatory regime is adequate to govern AI and machine learning in the UK financial services markets. The closing date for responses, for those of you who have responded, was the 10th of February this year. So no doubt the three regulators are considering what you said. So what are the likely outcomes? Changes to the FCA handbook, PRA rulebook, and other new rules and guidance, or leave as is? Personally, I think that the status quo isn't a viable option to regulate AI and machine learning effectively. Current laws, regulations, and guidance will certainly need to be clarified. So my advice to you is to keep a close watch on developments coming from three regulators. It's always a good idea, I find, to listen to what regulators say and signal informally. And in November last year, the FCA Chief Executive, Nikhil Rathi, made an interesting speech to UK finance called Rolling Regulation Forwards. It's available from the FCA website. And he referred to several things, including to SMCR. And he said, and I'm going to quote this, that many of the rules that cover financial services will already be in place, be that the Consumer Duty or the Senior Managers regime. You'll of course know that SMCR already imposes accountability on designated senior executives in certain financial services firms for aspects of the operations, including, for example, technology. That's under the SMF 24 role. But it seems clear that SMCR is not currently specific enough to cover AI, generative AI, and machine learning within the currently designated roles. So I think SMCR will almost certainly need to be expanded specifically to cover AI and machine learning, mainly because these technologies that you started hearing about and the processes associated with them present more complex, nuanced, and more diverse issues than we've seen to date, I would say, in back, middle, and front office technologies, applications, and processes. Which brings us quickly to the Consumer Duty, which was launched in July this year and for which you're all no doubt prepared. The Consumer Duty starts with the overarching principle that firms must act to deliver good outcomes for retail customers. You can see where this is going for artificial intelligence, but I'll say no more about the contents of the Consumer Duty here, as I'm sure you're all now familiar with it. The FCA certainly sees a place for AI in the Consumer Duty, particularly for the benefit of vulnerable customers. But it also recognizes that AI may distort a gap between outcomes for certain groups in society, so-called redlining, including vulnerable customers. And of course, AI will need to be deployed in good faith and to avoid causing foreseeable harm. This means, among other things, that firms will need to be transparent in their use of AI, that AI systems and outcomes will need to be, forgive me, explainable, and that bias is eliminated in data sets used for algorithmic processing and machine learning. All easier to say than to deliver, as you heard from those who know more than I do about this. So firms are going to need to decide how the consumer duty should be implemented in their deployment of AI, generative AI and machine learning. I have no doubt that the consumer duty will also be specifically tailored to AI and machine learning as it develops. But you can bet this, there will be no defense or justification that the black box did it, or that we can't explain how and why the algorithm decided to charge this retail customer in this way. Okay, so much for the future. What should you be doing now about AI and generative AI? I hope I'm being more practical here than just setting out a list of issues. For a start, you need to know that even if they weren't written with AI and machine learning in mind, some UK laws and regulations are perfectly capable, admittedly with some interpretation and application, most likely in litigation, of applying to the deployment of these technologies and processes. The problem is that today we don't know when, how, and why that law and regulation may apply. So the implications of their application aren't instantly obvious. But what is obvious is that there is clearly a growing movement of concern about and resistance to the use of AI, automated decision-making, or ADM, and related processes, and that regulatory and legal challenges are happening and happening now. Of course, breaking the law, breaching regulations could carry significant penalties, costs, civil claims and liability, and of course, reputational damage. So compliance with the law and regulation when it applies is basic hygiene. As an aside, and I think we started hearing about this, some regulated firms are using AI and machine learning for human capital management. That is in pre-recruitment targeting and advertising, the recruitment process itself, during the employment relationship, on termination of the employment relationship, and for workforce planning and remuneration surveys. This is a whole subject in itself. But I just wanted to use that because it is relevant. We are aware that a number of firms are increasingly using artificial intelligence and machine learning in and around the workplace. And it's also a way of giving you an example that current legal and regulatory uncertainty and unpredictability applies in this area as well. There are a range of laws and regulations affecting the workplace, as some of you will know. These are, for example, equality laws to protect certain characteristics and avoid discrimination in the hiring process. So, for example, age, disability, race, religion, and sexuality. The right not to be unfairly dismissed, the right to privacy at work, and the laws governing workplace and at-home surveillance. And by the way, that goes beyond GDPR. This is under the Human Rights Act. And of course, health and safety at work. Under all of these laws, the deployment of AI and generative AI could trigger breach claims and result in liability. The problem is that these laws and regulations were written long before AI, in particular generative AI, were developed. So they might or might not apply. But if your organization is using AI systems and processes in the workplace, you need to understand what the legal and regulatory implications are or might be. We come on to GDPR and privacy. Everyone here is or should be familiar with GDPR and the need to protect personal data of individuals, be they customers or employees or others whose personal data you control or have processed. Privacy is key. Whatever technologies or technology-enabled processes are being used, privacy remains key. You may have heard, for example, that the Italian Data Protection Authority very recently banned ChatGPT for, among other reasons, scraping personal data from the web without data subject knowledge or obviously consent. You may have picked up, I think over the weekend, that the UK Information Commissioner's Office has just announced that it will take similar enforcement action in all probability. Also bear in mind that GDPR, and currently, though it may change post-Brexit, the UK Data Protection Act and UK GDPR have specific rules governing automated decision-making, ADM, to ensure a level of transparency, explainability, human intervention in the process, and suitable redress. That's a whole subject in itself. This raises another question from the floor, which is the use of personal or valuable corporate data for machine learning or algorithmic processing. The question here is how will you prevent your organization's personal or corporate data leaking and being used by others, especially with generative AI processes? And the question of who legally owns data used in foundation data sets or data as outputs from AI and machine learning processes can be difficult, but you or someone in your organization should consider the question. Data leakage, whether of personal or corporate data, raises the much bigger consideration of cybersecurity, especially in the context of operational resilience in the UK and EU financial services markets. There are stories almost daily you will have read about how generative AI and large language model processing may lead to cyber breaches. Clearly, this must be a consideration if you're deploying AI, including generative AI. You're also likely to be familiar with the litigation that Getty Images in the US currently has against Stability AI for Stability AI's alleged scraping of Getty Images, as Getty alleges, for machine learning. Getty claims copyright in the training data and that its copyright has been infringed by Stability AI. Large language models, foundation, and other data sets are likely to contain proprietary works, images, code, text, or whatever is protected by copyright or database rights, to name some. Using them without a license may amount to an infringement. Please bear that in mind. Your organization may well be developing AI and machine learning, generative AI systems and processes internally, but the odds are your organization will be engaging at some point a third-party provider somewhere to support that development or the deployment of AI and machine learning. You really need to know how and where those third parties, and there may be several, fit into your supply chain, what exactly they're contributing, the risks they may cause for your organization, and the suitability of the contractual terms under which they're engaged. This falls under a number of regulations you'll be familiar with in the FCA and PRA rules. So does your organization have the rights it needs to manage those risks and those third parties who may, by the way, includes cloud service providers hosting your AI, machine learning, and generative AI systems and processes? The odds are one of the hyperscalers will be hosting. So, as a practical first step, before deploying any kind of AI, including, of course, generative AI, you need to have a system of governance in place that facilitates a review, whether managed internally or externally, of the implications of using AI systems and processes, whether you're using them internally or externally. Externally, of course, absolutely, because they'll be facing off to retail customers. Internally, for example, in and around your workplace. I suggest that the very first step in good ethical practice, it will be to create that system of governance. Many organizations have. In regulated firms, I think that should go right up to board level, particularly if your organization intends to deploy significant levels of AI internally or externally, and particularly if AI systems and processes can affect customer rights. There should be an impact assessment for each material AI deployment. Another basic threshold ethical measure is transparency. You would be surprised how little transparency there is when there should be in the deployment of AI systems and processes. But this means you need to tell whoever is going to be affected by AI and machine learning that these systems and processes are being deployed, again, externally or internally. Outcomes using AI and machine learning must be fair. You will see these, what I'm about to say next, in all sorts of statements of codes of ethics, whether they're from UNESCO or the OECD, or indeed serving as the basis for the UK regulatory regime. But this suggests an ethical need to audit outcomes and decisions taken in reliance on AI systems and processes. I've got to wrap up, but I'm leaving the most obvious point about generative AI until the last. Your organization would be out of its corporate mind to be deploying generative AI in its current state in live situations where it could actually affect the rights of customers, employees, or even third parties. You've heard about the use of AI in corporate, as it were, sandboxes. That makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense to have internal policies that mandate staff doing or not doing certain things with generative AI. I've come across several situations in the last few weeks where regulated firms have found that staff have been generating code using ChatGPT that is actually in use in those firms' systems and databases. And of course, from a comms perspective, it makes absolute sense to be telling your clients, business partners, and maybe more generally the public about your approach to the use of generative AI within the sandbox. So lots of things to consider. You've heard from a number of sources about AI being the end of humanity as we know it, but it does, of course, offer hugely exciting opportunities. I think we just need to go in with our eyes wide open and think about and try to understand all the implications and, of course, manage the risks. So have fun.
Wonderful. Sorry. Thank you, Mark. And sorry to cut you off there, but Mark will be around at the end for networking if anyone wants to call on him and ask a question. Just a brief note, and apologise for the echoey beep that we're getting. We're a bit of a victim of our own success here. That's every time someone new joins online. So hello to the online audience. Glad to have you. Be quiet. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is John Allen, who is Head of Innovation and Operations here at the Investment Association. And he is going to introduce our next segment on AI regulatory requirements and the government agenda. John.
Thank you, Henry. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Mark, for that very practical overview of considerations that firms should be utilising when considering using artificial intelligence within their own organisations. It certainly struck a chord with us because at the IA we're certainly looking at deploying AI where we can within our operations and making sure that we're supporting members as much as possible. In a moment or two, we're going to show you a video interview with the AI Minister. But before I do that, I just wanted to spend a moment or two to introduce, as this is the first Engine Tech Talk for some time, a new policy division within the Investment Association that is specifically looking at innovation. So I'm the head of the Innovation and Operations Unit, which is a new policy team that brings together a number of pre-existing work streams in order to help our member firms navigate the regulatory and policy environment in relation to many types of innovative pieces of work, including artificial intelligence. Now, when we put our priorities for the year together at the start of the year, AI wasn't quite as prominent as it is now. So we've certainly made some adjustments as we've gone through. But at that time, we were dealing with the discussion paper that Mark referenced earlier from the various UK regulators. And at this moment, we are asking for member feedback on a draft response to the government's white paper on its national AI strategy. which my colleague James King, who leads our work on AI, published in a circular last week. So we very much welcome your views and input on our draft response to that particular consultation. The main way that we receive member feedback and interaction on all things innovation is through our technology forum. Again, James runs that forum. And if you're not part of that, or you haven't been introduced to the Innovation Operations Unit previously, then please do get in touch, because we'd be very welcome. We would certainly welcome your input and involvement in those particular discussions. Now, there is a human in the room, hopefully, who will be able to press the button for us to show this particular video, which is the interview with the AI Minister, which I think will be very complementary to the overview that Mark gave us just now. And we're very pleased today to be launching our AI podcast, of which this is the second episode in the series. Now, as the Investment Association happily has the acronym IA, and we're talking about AI, there was an obvious name for the particular podcast. We've launched 2 episodes of those today, and we're going to show you the second interview, the second episode, which is an interview with the Minister. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. In this episode of IA Talks AI, we'll be hearing from Viscount Camrose, the Minister for Artificial Intelligence in the UK Government. Minister, what a time to be alive. Generative AI has certainly caught the imagination, and we're seeing lots of different products and services being generated almost on a daily basis, but also lots of risks are materialising across many different types of industries. I can only imagine what it's been like for you, though. I mean, what a time to be AI Minister. What would be your personal reflections on your time in office so far? And perhaps you could give us some thoughts on some exciting use cases that you've seen.
Sure. Well, I've been in office now for about 3 months, and as you say, it's a really amazing time for AI. I mean, 4 months ago, I think, you know, only people really with a pre-existing strong interest in AI took any kind of interest in it at all, and now it's very, very present as a prominent topic of debate pretty much every day. So it is indeed very exciting. I think one of the things that you know, I mean, that there are many emerging use cases and things that we haven't heard about yet that are going to come. But when I look at geospatial applications, I think that's right now particularly interesting and particularly high potential. I mean, you know, imagine for land use, I mean, whether you're sitting as we are here in the middle of Westminster or in a very rural area, there's a lot of data points about the land around us that we're in, you know, whether it's traffic, pollution, daylight, weather, temperature, and so on. And very quickly, under conventional technology, you hit a sort of data explosion, and you just can't optimize for anything without breaking some barriers. Whereas, you know, with AI and its ability to crunch large numbers of data, we'll be able to find ways to optimize use of land, and that, after all, in the UK is really you know, one of our defining scarcities. So to me, that's very exciting, not just from a business perspective, but from a societal perspective too.
Yeah, and very interesting from an investment perspective. Indeed, in terms of allocating resources. So you published the AI white paper just a few short months ago, but clearly things have moved on in terms of AI usage and products and services, and that could be seen as maybe sort of 10 years almost in AI time. How are you intending on making sure that the regulatory approach that you're putting forward remains relevant in 6 months' time, let alone, you know, 6 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, John, you put your finger on, this is the defining challenge of any attempt to regulate AI. It's just a really fast-moving field. So I think any approach that says, right, we're going to identify use cases or applications that we don't like and ban those, is doomed to failure, because you're going to end up playing whack-a-mole. By the time you shift your legislation around to banning the thing you don't like, 10 more things have come in their place. And that's why we really focused on an adaptive approach to regulating AI that's based on a set of principles and outcomes that we want to achieve, rather than a set of technologies and use cases that we want to stop. You see what I mean? And I think, that's the approach we've got to continuously take going forwards, and continuously adapt in this very, very fast moving environment.
So for investment management firms, we'll be most affected by what the FCA does, and how it applies those principles within the sector-specific areas. How are you intending on sort of coordinating the activity of the various sectors in financial services and beyond, to make sure that the principles that you're seeking to apply and the outcomes you're seeking to achieve, are consistently applied by those regulators?
Yeah, I mean, this is the key point. So let me briefly describe the kind of the architecture of how we intend to regulate it. So if you think of it as being in a series of layers, at the basic foundational layer is all of our existing regulators like the FCA and others, and all of their existing regulations, and those have to remain in place and as solid as they have ever been. On top of that, though, we have a series of principles, robustness, safety, security, fairness, explainability, redress, and so on, that cut across all AI applications. And those principles kind of guide us towards the outcomes that we want. And those, on top of the principles, sit this kind of centralized AI risk function. And they will be looking at scanning the horizon, looking for emerging risks, emerging opportunities. And they'll be supported in that by this very interesting regulatory sandbox that we're putting in place to allow new technologies to be tested for regulatory purposes, so that we can understand what the regulatory implications are of emerging technologies. And then crucially, on top of all of this, is a range of international engagements. And this is absolutely critical to the whole structure. And we engage bilaterally with all interested countries, great many of them, but we also engage with groups that are either exist already or are beginning to form in response to AI, because we have to understand, of course, that however good our approach to AI in the UK is, it has to make sense alongside everybody else's approach. And we can provide genuine thought leadership in this space, and we're very much open to other thought leadership as well.
I think that's extremely relevant to our members, because most of our members, have operations in other jurisdictions. They're not just UK focused, and they'll be following the debates, the very public debates in the US in particular, around the regulation of AI. And then there's the EU AI Act, which is probably taking a bit more of a prescriptive approach, rather than the principles approach that the UK is taking. So how do you think that's going to develop in the future? So you've said obviously you're collaborating, but what would be your prediction?
And look, I think the easiest and best way to see this is that there are two kind of waves of AI that we're worrying about right now, or we're engaged with right now. And one is this wave of risks that we're seeing at the moment, risks and opportunities. Disruption to existing working practices, the potential for mis and disinformation by AIs, the potential for ease of creation of autonomous weapons, and so on. These are quite here and now, and very much focus of existing thinking about regulation. But then there's the second wave, the so-called artificial general intelligence, the nascent superintelligence, and the risk that we end up creating entities that are smarter than us, that have greater expertise than us in most areas. And that's another kind of wave of risk, and it's more theoretical and a little bit further out, although it's argued that these two waves are coming together. And I think, for both of those two waves, we really need to understand internationally, or we need to cooperate very effectively internationally, particularly given the potentially existential risks of that second wave of the AGI, it's in everybody's interests to collaborate widely and internationally around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be very interested in contributing to that debate. We'll be responding to your AI white paper consultation. But overall, have you got any central messages that you would like us to take back to the investment management community?
Yeah, look, I think if I can offer two bits of advice to anyone in the investment management or really in any business community, the first one is really think very carefully about the potential use cases that are coming from AI. And if you can't see that many, I'd suggest think again, because they're going to take us by surprise in some cases. And look to see how you would adapt to that, because it is going to be creatively disruptive in all walks of business life for a bit. But secondly, focus on skills. A lot of the people in your organizations are going to need different skills. There are a number of ways those skills can be provided, skills in data science, skills in other AI-related disciplines. There's a range of government scholarships, and look into seeing if those make sense for your firm or any of the firms that you invest in. But skills are going to be the key bridge from getting from where we are today to where we need to get to tomorrow.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Minister.
Great.
So that interview was recorded last week. Let's see how the policies potentially adjust over time as the government takes feedback from industry and the public about those particular proposals. And please do get in touch if you have particular views on it, so that we can feed that back to the government in our response. Now, the IA Talks AI podcast is now available wherever you usually get your podcasts from, or from the IA website, or from YouTube, Spotify, those sorts of locations. So please do subscribe. There are 2 episodes available at the moment, and future episodes will feature other policymakers such as the FCA, investment management firms displaying their use of AI within their own firms, and also engine innovators who have interesting products and services to potentially use as well. So indeed, if you would like to feature on the podcast, please do get in touch with us, and we would be very pleased to get you involved. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage 2 speakers who will be talking about the future of work. So we have from Microsoft, Alessandro, and my colleague, Jill Painter, who's going to lead that discussion. Please welcome them to the stage.
Well, I think we're running slightly behind time, but we do have a really interesting section now. So thank you so much to all of our speakers so far, and thank you to John. Really excited to see what happens and the additional content that we see through the IA Does AI podcast. I'm never going to get that right. Imagine sitting with a hot cup of tea with that report that you've got to write. It's going to take you 4 hours. It's a bit of a nightmare, but something magical happens and you start a really delightful conversation with ChatGPT, and before you know it, it's completed within 2. I mean, that was just a dream a couple of months ago, and actually that's a reality. And whilst it's not perfect, it certainly helps reduce some of that time that you could have spent going over and over the same content. And generative AI, as we all know, really does have the potential to revolutionise the way that we work. And that's across all industries, with regard to content creation, with regard to data analysis, with regard to automation and efficiency. And we've just heard from Viscount Camrose, the Government Minister for AI at IP, about the need to focus on skills and the need to focus on different skills and different disciplines. And that's really going to be the focus of what we talk about today in terms of the future of work. Now, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report back in 2000 estimated that AI will replace 85 million jobs. but it also stated it will create 97 million new ones. So this is a really exciting time for work and for the way that we do things. And while AI may complement rather than substitute most jobs, there is that debate that workers will be exposed to potentially 25 to 50% of their more repetitive tasks may well be reduced by AI or even replaced. But surely, Alessandro, this is a good thing. You know, it allows organisations and individuals to use their time more effectively. And so I guess really coming to you now, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm quite sure that Microsoft has quite a few insights and predictions on how the world of work might look and the use of human capital and how that's going to change. As I said, we heard from Viscount Camrose about the need to focus on skills and the need for those different skills. And, you know, again, another statistic, 82% of leaders anticipate employees are going to need those additional skills as we embrace the AI era. But what are they? And what does it really mean? And how is it going to complement AI? And how is AI going to complement us?
Well, it's an interesting question. So one of the things, sure, we do have a vision and we published it. There is, you know, all the index of, you know, working trends that we do every year that goes around a number of institutions around the world, that goes around our internal workforce, goes around different verticals and comes out with all the stats. But what is interesting there really is also some of the unexpected things that came out, right? So things that maybe were not so clear at the beginning, the debit that everyone, the technological debit that everyone is accumulating at work. You know, the level of content generation has increased in the last 5 years at an insane rate. So everyone is overwhelmed. Think about how many are today behind reading email or messages, or how many times a day you think, I've been here doing this and this is really, you know, not allowing me to do creativity. So the interesting part of all the additional co-pilots, this is the word of the day that we're bringing in, and then getting from the users, you know, developers saying, well, at the end of the day, I would rather have this, you know, helping me to alleviate the technological debt and, you know, the burn off of repetitive tasks than actually be threatened. This is on a large scale. On the skill level, I always, you know, and we were talking about before that we've been doing, you know, some session 5 years ago. I feel that, you know, we've been saying the same things for the last few years. Adaptability, that's for sure. Learning to learn any new skill, that's, you know, key because the pace of rate of change is really fast. But there are emerging new approach. So you talk about, you know, the new job created. Everyone at one point is talking about prompt engineering and how much they pay and how many prompt engineers there are there. For the more technical approach, who is doing the reinforcement learning, human feed part. So a lot of new job discussion over the fact, those are just the early stage discussion over the fact that this job are they going to last? They're going to be safe. There is a fine, interesting quote from the former chief of AI in Tesla on Twitter saying the new sexy code language is English. Because, and it's interesting, right? It's a natural language where, you know, a lot of use cases we're seeing with people sitting down and say, okay, write my code. Now, someone before was saying, would you put that code in production? So this is the key. I agree, no one should go with anything directly. This is an argumentation that is really powerful. Why would you put any code in production without review? Just because it's been written by an AI is not different. So that's really interesting how another comment before was like, where is the unique idea? So do we want to be replaced or don't? Do we want to be the creative one? The idea is, if you look at this as an argumentation, I don't see the risk how I didn't see it before. For the skill, there will be a lot of other skills that get into the picture. One interesting part will be the skill of your job. what you were describing before was very interesting. I think augmenting, whether it is with the ChatGPT or any other large language model, will give an advantage to anyone who knows more about the detail of his own job. So in other way, before someone said, maybe he's not going to replace the trader, but he's going to replace, the trader that used ChatGPT is going to be the winner. And that can be in any vertical. I think this is really the key. The new type of skill might be not that new. It can be more, and definitely how to communicate. It can be more able to understand your own specific knowledge. And then, of course, anything that is around machine learning, data science, statistics, definitely had, a bright future. But that happened also, it was the same 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And, we have been talking about how generative AI and other aspects may greatly reduce legwork. That's what we're talking about here, those repetitive tasks. And so we're able to spend more time on those higher order cognitive tasks. But what steps should organisations take, and what steps should policymakers perhaps take to prepare for the adoption of generative AI in more mass market scenarios? And how are we actually going to support workers through this transition? Because it's change. And as we all know, people are resistant to change.
Yeah, so that's something that we sort of bump every day in any type of vertical or use case. What is the organization doing? How are they preparing? What are their policymakers? What are the check around that? One of the things is definitely, if you want to be prepared for this, is definitely understand where is the state of the technology today, what can be achieved. When you look at use cases, we got from customers coming with thousands of them, literally with very creative ideas, some of them very surprising, and someone coming with as we were saying before, the usual use case, just a little bit augmented. The reality is what you have to understand is the implication and risk. What fail-safe are you putting around? Who is these things going to serve? The final user, unauthenticated, or a user that is controlled and authenticated? How do you track? How do you log? So I feel that what we tell everyone is, how are you building around whatever is your product? How do you build the fail-safe and the security of what you're delivering in terms of people, processes? And for the regulation and the larger policymaker, some good points are coming out from the main government body. But I think I keep saying what I used to say a few years ago. This is a work we have to do, everyone together. So the transparency can only happen if all the university, all the government, all the private company work together. Because otherwise, if someone is doing one thing on one side and another one on the other side, it can go very quick out of hand. One nice comment I followed on Twitter, all the drama where these things should be stopped or not, and Ian LeCun, which it's one of the father of the convolutional neural network and also the chief of the AI at Meta, said, why are we trying to regulate the research? That's not the point. The point is not stopping regulating the research. The point is, are we regulating the product? Are we regulating the vertical? And I think that's what every company should be very aware. What am I aiming to do? And how I'm actually building these things so that can increase not just the revenue, but everything around, including stability and reliability.
That makes absolute sense. And Mark was speaking about the impacts of AI on the recruitment process, on employment relationships. I'm sort of thinking, what ways can generative AI enhance productivity, enhance efficiency, specifically within the investment management sector? I know it's not necessarily your focus area, but I'd be keen to better understand your thoughts on that. I'm aware we are slightly out of time, but I've just got one more question after this, so hopefully you'll stay with us.
I think one of the things is, a lot of things have been already, sort of covered. It's not my area, but I do work with a lot of fintech and a lot of, different type, and a lot of people come through the same things. Can I do it's portfolio management, it's trading. The reality is, the way I see the strength today is a lot of argument productivity internally. So that's an easier low-hanging fruit. It's easier to regulate. And once you see that working, then you might be more willing to invest in other area. But other area, I like the GDPR comment, right? Profiling human being, it's a risky business, because we know that you cannot do it if you're going to impact their life. And some of the customers we have, they're serving, my group work around the world, different market that are emerging market where people are not easy to, get a credit score or even, a solid, let's say, reliability on payment. It's interesting how everyone is trying to use this technology. It can be done, but I wouldn't focus on only one use case. The winner one definitely is increase the internal productivity, and the example on the documentation that I did before, right? So if you have anything that can help on index semantic search, vector search, anti-distraction, again, I'm going to say things if you know what you're looking at, it's going to improve a lot, and it's going to be an easier conversation to get it to production.
No, absolutely. Now, I've got just one final question. Are we heading for extinction, or will AI ultimately help make work more enjoyable? What do you reckon?
I'm definitely not a fan of these Skynet, Sarah Connor's conversation. Every other day we had either like someone destroying and taking over, or someone, with winter of AI coming and that destroy the market. I don't think there is that type of risk. I do think that, in one of the book I was reading on generative AI, there is an interesting comment of someone saying we might be the most powerful generative AI model that this world has ever seen. So if that's the case, I keep saying, I always seen human being the driver of anything, including the things that are destructive. So I'm not sure I would worry too much about, the extinction on AI.
So it's going to make work more enjoyable. That's what we've heard today from Microsoft. So this is great news.
That's for sure. I mean, as I said, we clearly stated with stats. If you look at the work lab that we publish, we have a website, work lab, where we publish all these stats and indexes. And I can see, using the preview of all the Office Copilot and team, and there is a lot of work that I really don't like to do. And they do a great job of doing it for me. Again, checking it and knowing what you're doing is the key. You were mentioning Italy regulation. Obviously, I'm originally from Italy, and the funny things, when it was stopped, I was there, and I have a niece and a nephew, 14 and 16 years old, that know very well what I do. They never ask me how to use ChatGPT, but they came and asked me, "Hey, uncle, how come they stopped ChatGPT?" To which make me sit with them and saying, "Why are you using it?" And not, without telling anyone. Because what you have to understand of this tool is not for you to sit and say, "Can you write my essay for tomorrow so that I don't have to do it?" But maybe also understanding more of the topic and how the tool can be used. I don't want, to give the impression that they're going to have to be locked on that, because that would be like, people stopping their kids to use calculator, or get into computer, or use internet, or using a search engine or anything like that. So I'm definitely for the pro that is going to make our life better if it's well taught, and if there is an education around the usage of the tools.
It's like everything, use with caution, crossing the road, it's that
Exactly.
same principle. Thank you so much, Alessandro, and thank you to all of our exceptional speakers today. And I do apologise for running slightly over. We've had some really, really useful insights. Well, I know we've only just scratched the surface of AI and generative AI, and there's still an awful lot of issues to resolve. And maybe next month, generative AI can solve the rail disputes. Let's hope that one is a winner. But if you would like to get more involved and you would like to find out more about what we're doing here at the IA, please do come to myself, to Henry, to John, or to any of the team. And if you do want to get in touch with any of the speakers here today, please, again, do come via us. But we are going to have a few drinks and nibbles now for those in the room, and would be very grateful if you could join us. It's always nice to have an open discussion with the speakers. I think I do have one last piece of feedback, though, if you wouldn't mind just clicking on the QR code and giving us your thoughts on today and what you'd like to see in the future. It's super helpful to us. And for our online attendees, thank you so much for making the effort. I'm sorry that the trains meant you couldn't be with us in person, and we sincerely hope you've enjoyed the last hour and a half and look forward to seeing you soon.